Good morning to all the students. So in today's session we are planning to go through some of the important points regarding this exception handling. Right. So in the previous class we have discussed what these exceptions are and what are the types of exceptions, and we have ended our discussion with one programming example. And in today's class we will discuss very important points regarding these exceptions with a programming example each, right? So we have around 9 to 10 points which we need to discuss, and whatever points I have marked in this green mark, so I am providing a programming example. As I told that everything I get it from the internet only, right? So I just want to explain the concepts which are very much clear to you. That's it, right? So whatever I have given, whatever points I have given in this green mark, we will try to explore it with the example, right? And regarding this white, we will also try to check it, but this is something related to theoretical part, right? So that's why I didn't give any programming example. So let us start our discussion without any delay. So some important points regarding this exception handling is, the first point is there is a special catch block to catch all the exceptions. When I am discussing about this exception handling mechanism, I told that once you have an exception, you should have a catch block. That means you should handle that exception. You have the exception, but you are unable. When we have an exception but you are unable to catch it, then it will lead to the program that terminates abnormally, right? So whenever you have an exception, you should catch it, right? But sometimes the programmer does not know what type of exception it is generating. That means what type of value it is throwing. For example, in the yesterday's class we discussed that one programming example where it is throwing an integer value. That means throw of d, right, where d is something which is related to integer data type, and we will write a corresponding catch block which have a parameter int d. So when an exception is thrown with an integer value, the corresponding catch block which is having a parameter integer will be activated, and then the remaining process continues. But assume that there is a situation where the user does not know what type of exception, what type of value he is able to throw. He doesn't have any idea that he is able to throw the integer or float or char or an object of a class. In such situations, we have a generic catch block. We can call it as a generic catch block where it is capable of catching any exception, right? So if none of the catch blocks is matching, then by default that catch block can be executed, right? Is it clear what I have told?
Yes, sir.
So that particular catch block, we call it as a special catch block, or we can call it as a generic catch block, or we can call it as a default catch block. Like that, we have different terminologies available with this particular special catch block, but let us go with what the author has given, right? So there exists a special catch block which can catch all the exceptions. This particular situation arises whenever the user doesn't have any idea which type of value the exception has been generated and what type of value he wants to throw, right? So I'll tell you how it can be written, right? So in general, how can you write a catch block? What is the keyword for catch? So it is catch keyword,
Catch, sir.
and within the parenthesis, right, you should write it as a function. I told you in the first class itself. So within the catch block you have to specify the parameter. You can write it like this, or you can write it like this also, right? But these particular catch blocks are very specific to that particular data type. So if I write like this, it is very specific that it can catch hold of only the floating point versions. But in order to write a generic catch block, instead of specifying the data type and the variable, we will specify the catch block with 3 dots. That's it. With 3 dots we will specify it. So the compiler will come to know that this particular catch block is a generic catch block where it can catch hold of any exception that is thrown by the user. So is it clear up to this point? So remaining thing is very much is similar to that of what exceptions we have discussed in the yesterday's class, right? Everything is similar except that the catch block which can catch hold of any exception is written in this particular syntax, where we have the same catch keyword followed by parenthesis, and within the parenthesis we just write the 3 dots. That's it. Remaining catch block body, everything remains the same. So if it is clear, we'll go with an example.
Yes, sir.
Right. So this is the programming example for this special catch block. So I'm not taking the classes concept, right? I just want to explore these try catch blocks. So I just take the main and I go through my program, right? iOS stream, std, we know everything. And see here, I have a try block here. What is a try block? Anybody please tell me what is the use of the try block?
To activate a hand exception, sir.
So try block is used to activate the exception. What is the purpose of throw?
To throw the exception, sir.
Super. To throw the exception. It's not the catch, right? It is just used to throw the exception from try block so that it can catch hold of that exception that is thrown will be caught by any catch block that is described or defined below this try. Right. See
Yes,
here.
sir.
So the catch block, as we can say that it is used to handle the exception. Now tell me. So I am clear about this try block. So the try block consists of just a single statement throw of 10. So I am throwing an integer value. So don't assume that the try block consists of only throw, right? You can write any type of code. As I told that whenever you have a doubt that that particular set of statements or the block of code will generate an exception, you can simply put it under try block. That's it. Right. So for this simple example, I am taking just a throw statement which throws a value of 10. What is the data type of 10?
Integer, sir.
Integer, right? So if I go and check the catch blocks which are defined below this try, how many catch blocks are there? There are 2 catch blocks, and as I told in the yesterday's class, we can have multiple catch blocks for a single try block, and it is mandatory that you should define at least one catch block, right? If you don't define the catch block, what does it mean? You are not able to catch the exceptions which is thrown by the try block, right? So as I told that when you are unable to catch the exceptions thrown by the try block, then it will lead to a situation where your program will terminate abruptly, right? So coming back to our example again, we have 2 catch blocks, catch block 1 and catch block 2. If you discuss about this catch block 1, so the catch block 1 is having one parameter. Can anybody tell me what is the data type of this parameter?
Character, sir.
Characters.
It's not character, Amma. It's not character, right? It is a character to a pointer. That means it can be a string, right? Here you can see a *1, right? So character pointers are used to store the strings. So that point is very important. You might have studied in the C programming language, right? So it is not a single character, it is a character pointer. Therefore this catch block is capable of holding the strings. So in this catch block I have written a simple cout statement, caught, and whatever string that has thrown at that particular try block will be displayed. That's it. So for example, if I throw an exception, a string like CSC, let us take an example, right? So here I will get the output as cout caught CSC. That's it. So remember that this character pointer is used to catch hold of strings, not the characters, right? So coming to the discussion on this second catch block, catch off, you can see here that within the parenthesis we have specified 3 dots, right? So this is a default exception, as I told, right? So if nothing has been, no catch block is matched with the exception thrown. Here I have thrown the integer value 10, but there are only two catch block. One is holding of the strings and another one it is a default exception, right? If no catch block is matching, then by default this catch block, which is called as a default catch block, will be executed, right? So this 10 will go and execute after this throw statement. It will go and check this exception, check this catch block, but here the parameter is not matching, therefore it will not execute this block. Therefore it will go to the next catch. It will look at this catch block and it has seen that this is the default exception. It will accept any exception, whether you throw integer, float, char, string, and similarly if you throw any objects, it is capable of catching any exception, right? So it will execute this particular catch block and it will print the statement as default exception, right? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. So coming to the next point, so the implicit type conversion is not supported for the primitive data types. So when you are throwing the exceptions, you are able to throw the integer, you are able to throw the float, you are able to throw the char, right? So don't assume, don't be in a wrong assumption that the type conversion will going to happen, right? Type conversion will happen and the corresponding catch block will be executed, right? So at this juncture, let me explain a simple concept of implicit type conversion, right? So let me tell you what this implicit type conversion is for just 2 minutes. Can anybody tell me what do you understand by type conversion?
Changing one data type to another data type, sir.
Super, right? We are going to change one data type into another data type. That is what is called as type conversion. How many types of typecasting are there? It is also called as typecasting. You know very well, right? So how many types of typecasting are there?
Implicit, explicit, sir.
Super, implicit and explicit. Tell me, what do you mean by implicit typecasting? What do you mean?
Implicit conversion is done by compiler, sir.
Right.
In explicit user must do it.
Right. Implicit type conversion means the conversion of one data type to another data type will be automatically done by the compiler. The user is not responsible. The user does not have has nothing to do with the triggering of the conversions. Automatically done by the compiler. Such type of conversions we call it as implicit type conversions, right? So let us have a short discussion on this one. So how many types of data types are there? Primitive data types. How many types of primitive data types are there? Super, int, float, char, okay. Any other thing?
Double.
Okay, double also comes under float only, but let us take it as the fundamental data type, right? So if you write it in a hierarchical manner, right? So we have a Boolean data type. Have you ever heard of this Boolean data type?
Yes, sir.
Right. So
Yes, sir.
so it takes only one bit. It's not byte. It will take only one bit, right? It will say 1 or 0, or it will say yes or no, like that, right? So after this bool, that means this is the least memory occupied data type. Am I correct or not?
Yes, sir.
And after that we have
Yes, sir.
the character. What is the size of character in C?
1 byte, sir.
1 byte. Super, right? Next, what is that it is occupying? After char we have
Int, sir.
int, right? But before int we have some qualifiers, right? Qualifiers means short int. Have you ever heard of this qualifier?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
We call them as data type qualifiers, short, long, all these things. So short int occupies less memory than integer, and similarly integer occupies less memory than long integer, and similarly we can also write it as long integer also. Like that we can have any number of things, right? So let us remove this one, not an issue. So in the integer set we have the short int and long int. So this is the hierarchy, right? It is, I'm just writing this hierarchy based on the memory that is occupied by each and every data type, right? So after this, what is the set? Next set I have
Float, sir.
super, right? Float. So above float, do I have any data type? Yes, you have explained it now, right? It is double. So double is having more memory that is occupied than float. So do I have anything above this double also?
Long double, sir.
Super, right? We can have this long double. So this is the hierarchy. This is the hierarchy we have, right? So if we give the ranking for this, I start this with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So let me give 8 ranks for all these data types. So while implicit type conversion, so you might be hearing about the concept called promotion and demotion. What do you mean by promotion? Right. So this promotion and demotions are nothing but it happens in the assignment operation. So when you take an assignment operation, for example, let me take A is equal to B. This is how the value is copied, right? From right to left. So when you are copying from right to left, the right operator, the right hand side operator is going to be converted into the left hand side operator. So this is what is called as a conversion, right? So when the right hand side operator is having less rank than the left hand side operator, this is having more rank, right? So we are converting the less ranked operator into a highest ranked operator. So we call it as a promotion. We are giving promotion to the ranks. So when you convert the bool into character, let me take, when you convert the bool into character, so what happens here?
Promotion, sir.
It is called as promotion, right? Similarly, demotion means it's a reverse case where you will write like this. So B is having the less rank and A is having the highest rank. So we are converting the highest rank into lowest ranks. So in such case we call this as demotion, right? So these are the two ways of casting. Implicit typecasting only, automatically the compiler will take care. So it can happen either in the promotion manner or it can happen in the demotion manner also, right? So when we are using the promotion, that means when you are converting a less rank into higher rank, nothing will happen, right? Nothing means there is no difficulty, there is no problem in using the promotions. But while you are decreasing the rank, the highest ranked operator or the operand is converted into a lowest ranked operand. So in such case we will call it as demotion, but demotion may sometimes lead to errors, right? Demotion is not always correct, but promotion is always correct, right? So these are the two important points you should remember. Is it clear up to this point?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. So let us take an example here. Let us take a boolean value. Let us take it as t, small t, boolean t is equal to, I assign the value true. So what does a true value represent? Is it 1 or 0?
1, sir.
1, right? And again I take character some ch, let me take it as ch. Char ch is equal to, I write it as small a. This is 1. Now I want to use the statement as ch is equal to t. Now tell me, is it promotion or demotion?
Demotion, sir.
No. Be careful. Is it promotion or demotion?
Promotion, sir. Promotion.
It is promotion. You have to check from right to left, right? So the T is going to be converted into CH. That means T, that means Boolean operand is going to be converted into the character operand. So okay, this is demotion, right?
T is equals to CH, sir.
No, I think I have given the ranks in the reverse order.
No, sir.
Right. So if I write T is equal to C, or let us take it as CH is equal to T. What happens here? The T value is going to be stored inside this CH. That means instead of A, the true value is stored. Therefore, 1 is stored here, like this. So if you display this CH, you will get the value of 1. So let us not go deep into this particular concept. So this is how the implicit type conversion takes, right? We have different types of rank. This is just to understand the concept, ranking and everything. So we have promotion and demotion. Remember that promotion has no difficulties, but demotion has, sometimes it may arise some problems, right? For example, if we have a integer variable I and you want to store a double variable D inside this one, right? This is called as demotion. Am I right or not?
Yes, sir.
So 8th
Yes, sir.
rank, double means it is having the 7th rank, and I means it is having, integer means 4th rank. So I want to convert the 7th ranked variable into the 4th ranked variable. Therefore, this is a demotion. So in such case, as I told, that this will lead to some problem. That means double means it is having some floating point decimal values, right?
Yes, sir.
But integer is capable of storing only the real values. That means only the original values. It is not going to store the numbers after the decimal point, right? So in such case, what it will do is all the decimal values will be simply neglected. They are gone, but only the decimal point, the left side part of the decimal point will be stored inside this I. So as you can observe here, that the demotion makes some value to be terminated. So it is not available, that is it is not able to store inside this I variable. So sometimes these type of problems will occur, and sometimes you may not predict the value also. In this type of demotions, you are unable to predict the values. So as I told, that we have problems with the demotion, but when you go for the promotion, you doesn't have any problem, right? Everything will be very much clear. So is it clear up to this point?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So this is all about the implicit type conversion, where you are going to convert one type of data into another type of data, right? And why we have discussed all these things means, I told that the implicit type conversion is not at all supported in for the primitive data types in exceptions, right? Exception does not make use of this implicit type conversion. If it is clear, let me explain it with an example. Is it clear?
Clear,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Right. So let me take one more example here, right? So implicit type conversion does not happen for primitive data. It is also very simple example, right? So I take a main block, and within the main block I take one try block, and within the try block I throw A. Now tell me, what is this A? What type of data
Character,
is it?
sir.
Super,
Character,
right?
sir.
So I am going to throw a character value, and as usual I have written two catch blocks. The first catch block is going to catch hold of the integer value,
Integer.
therefore it is going to catch the integer exceptions, and the second one is the default exception, default catch block. So it is going to catch anything. So you may not assume, so whenever a character is thrown, it will go and check the first catch block, right? So if implicit type conversion is supported, so A is automatically converted into integer. Is it promotion or demotion?
Promotion, sir.
Right, it is promotion. The lower value, that is a character is something second rank and integer is fourth rank. So you are converting the second rank into, what is this one? right? So we are converting the character into integer, right? Therefore we are giving some promotion, but this type of conversions is not at all possible in the exceptions. So it will just check whether the data type is matching or not. Here I am throwing the char, but here it is declared as integer, therefore there is a mismatch here. Therefore it will go and check the next exception, next catch block, and here we can find that this catch block is a default catch block which can catch hold of any exception. So this catch block is executed, therefore the output we get is default exception. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
It's not the this catch block is executed and we won't get this output. This is not possible, right? So after this, so give me 1 minute of time, let me clear this. So what about the third point we have here? So if an exception is thrown and it is not caught anywhere, the program terminates abnormally. This is very important. So whenever you have exceptions that is thrown from the try block, it is your responsibility to catch hold of those exceptions and handle those exceptions. So if it is not the case, then the program will terminate abnormally, right? So let me explain this with an example. Right, you can see this screen, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
See here, the same example I am taking, so that it will be very easy for you, right? So I have taken the main block, and within the main block I have written the try block where I am throwing a character exception and just throwing a character value, right? And I have defined only one catch block here, no default exceptions, no default catch blocks I have defined. So when I throw a character, it will go and check the first catch block that is immediately written after this try block, right? So it will check for this matching of the data types of this thrown A and here, right? But here the thrown value is a character, but the catch is accepting an integer. Therefore there is a mismatch. So it tries to execute the other catch block, but there are no catch blocks here. So you are throwing a character exception, you are throwing a type of character, and that is not caught anywhere inside the program using the catch blocks. So this will ultimately lead to program termination, right? So if you execute this one, you can understand. Shall I execute it?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Right. So let me take the online compiler first. Just give me 2 minutes of time. Let me make modifications here. Right. So are you able to see the screen, right?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
So if I execute this program, what is the output I got? So terminate called after throwing an instance of char, it is aborted. You won't get any output, the program will be aborted, right?
Yes, sir.
So it is clear, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now coming to the next point, we have the fourth point, that is a derived class exception should be caught before a base class exception. Very important point, right? So you always, whenever you go through this parent and derived class concepts, right, so you always give preference to the children class only, even when the destructors are called. You might have seen in the concept of virtual destructors. So
Yes, sir.
what is the purpose of virtual destructor?
To deallocate the memory, sir.
Okay, it is the purpose of destructor to deallocate the memory, right? But what is the use of virtual destructor? Any destructor is used to destruct the memory only, right? But the purpose of virtual destructor, we have discussed it clearly, that the virtual destructors are used to destruct the memory starting from the base classes and going up to the starting from the derived classes and going up to the base class. So when you have a virtual destructor, then when you are coming out of the program, or when you are coming out of the scope of the program, then what happens is it will automatically, the compiler will automatically call the destructor function, that we know, right? But if you don't define the virtual destructor, so it will directly go and invoke the base class destructor, right? But the concept here is you have to destruct the memory that is allocated for the derived classes first, and then you have to go for the destruction of the base class. So this happens only with the concept of virtual destructors. So when you write a virtual destructor, when you are coming out of the scope of the program, then the virtual destructor of the derived classes will be invoked first, and then it will pass on to the destructor function call of the base class, right? So in order to destruct everything starting from the derived classes up to the base classes, we will use the concept of base classes. So there also you can observe that the destruction happens from the base class, from the derived class, right? First the derived classes will be destructed, and then it will go to the destruction of the base class. Here also in exceptions, it is very important that the exceptions of the derived classes has to be caught first before a base class exception. We'll see it with an example, right? Just remember that derived classes exception should be caught before the exceptions of the base class are caught, right? So you always prefer to give derived classes only, give preference to the derived classes. Shall I go for the program part here?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
See here. So before discussing the program part, let me explain these two notes. Here I have written that if both base and derived classes are caught as exceptions, right? What is this base class, derived class exceptions are? You may get a doubt. As I told that the exception can throw an exception is caught. If an exception is caught, you can throw an integer value, you can throw a string, you can throw a character, you can throw a floating point value. Similarly, you can throw the objects also. So when the objects are thrown, then this particular case will come into existence. So if both base and derived classes are caught as exceptions, then catch block of the derived class must appear before the base class. That is important, right? So you always try to write the catch block of the derived class first, and then you go for the catch block of base class. That is, I am saying about the definition part. So you always try to write the catch block of the derived class first, and then you go for the catch block of base class. If you do it in a reverse order, the base class exception will never be caught. The base class exception will never be caught. So if we put the base class first, that means if we put the base class catch block first, then the derived class catch block will never be reached, right? See here. So I am not defining any data members or member functions for the base and derived class. I just want to explore the concept of exceptions with respect to base and derived classes. So I have defined a class which is called as base. I don't have any private data members or public data members or member functions. I just define a class, that's it. And after that I have the class derived, which is publicly derived from the base. Here also you can observe that the derived class also does not have any members, data members or member functions. Now coming to our main function, you can see here I have created a derived class object. And here I am using the try block. So try of, I am throwing, what is that I am throwing here?
Object of derived class.
An object of derived class, right? So when it is thrown, what happened is, right, what happens here?
It should catch, sir.
So it should catch, that means the throw block, the throw has to throw it to the this one, but this does not happen. Why? Because you are writing the catch block of the derived class after the catch block of the base class, right? So in such case this catch block will never be executed, right? The point here you have to remember is you should always define the catch block of the derived class first, and then only you have to define the catch block of base class, right? So in such case, if you write like this, the catch block of base class is written first and then you write the catch block of derived class, so this particular block will never be executed, right? So is it clear?
Yes, sir.
You may be thinking that here it will go and check this base class, and since it is not matching, it will go like this, right? So it doesn't happen this way in case of objects. So do you want to see the output? Shall
Yes,
I?
sir.
Okay. Sorry. So give me 2 minutes of time. Okay, so let us do one thing. We'll try to explain the remaining concepts and then we'll come back again to execute this code, right? So it is unnecessary waste of time.
Yes, sir.
Is it clear, right, up to this point? So when you have the base class and derived class objects, you always try to put the catch block of the derived class first and then the catch block of the base class next. If you put it in a reverse order, it will never, the catch block of the derived block will never be executed, right? So let us go with the next point and see here the next point, fifth point. So the C++ library has a standard exception class, which is the base class of all standard exceptions. This is a theoretical point where the author tries to say that we have a class called the standard exception class, from which we can derive the remaining standard exceptions, right? So we can write our own exceptions, right? We can write our own exceptions. So if you want to write our own exceptions, then you have to derive a special class called the exception class. So that is called the standard exception class. This class we have to derive, and then you can define your own exceptions. So what the author is trying to say is this exception class serves as the base class for all the remaining exceptions. Whatever exceptions you take, that will be derived from this base class, and that base class is named as the exception class. It is just a theoretical point, you just remember it, right? So if there is any programming part related to this creation of our own exceptions with this exception class, I'll tell you, right? Is it clear up to this point?
Clear, sir.
Yes, sir.
And here also we have one more thing, that is in C++ all exceptions are unchecked, right? So if you just have to just have a small discussion on these unchecked and checked exceptions. So we don't have the concept of checked exceptions in C++. We have only the unchecked exceptions. Actually, as I told that, how many types of exceptions are there? Yesterday we have seen, right? What are the various types of exceptions? Two types. What are they? Super.
Synchronous, asynchronous, sir.
Synchronous exceptions
Synchronous
and synchronous exceptions. Super, right? So like this, we also have some other category of exceptions which are called as the checked exceptions and unchecked exceptions. Right? This is not the case with the C++. I'm telling you about the Java, right? So in Java we have two types of exception, that is checked exception and unchecked exception. So what do you mean by unchecked and what do you mean by checked exception? Means a checked exception means a method should be there in order to handle its body and throw it to the caller, right? So you should define your own method so that it can catch hold of the exception and it can throw it to the handler function, right? So some of the examples of this checked exception are class not found exception and SQL exception and IO exception. So all these categories come under the checked exceptions. But coming to the unchecked exceptions, here the compiler is not going to check the exception, right? We are not burdening the compiler to check these exceptions. But in checked exceptions, the compiler is taking the responsibility to check the exception, right? So why we are saying that the C++ exceptions are all unchecked means these particular exceptions come during the execution only, right? During execution part, does the compiler has anything to do during the execution or during the runtime? Is there anything to do with the compiler?
No, sir.
No, right? The compiler has already compiled the code and generated the necessary obj code, and we are taking that obj code and we are executing it. So that is called as running. So the part of the compiler is completed when we are running the program. So compiler does not take any responsibility during the running, right? So all these unchecked exceptions, we categorize it as the compiler does not check whether an exception is caught or not, right? That means the compiler is not taking the responsibility of handling these exceptions, right? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. So we have some exceptions, some examples of these exceptions, like unchecked exceptions, like arithmetic expressions, class cast exceptions. This part I am telling it in the Java, right? So we don't have any concept of checked exceptions in C++. Whatever exceptions we have, everything will be categorized under unchecked exception only, right? So unchecked means you remember that compiler is not going to take the responsibility. That means it is going to be execute. These errors are going to be, or these exceptions are at the runtime. As we know that the runtime exceptions, runtime errors, we call it as exceptions. That's it, right? So this is one important point. We should remember that there is no concept of checked exceptions in C++. Only unchecked, right? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes, sir.
And the next point which we are going to discuss is, can we can use functions to specify all uncut exceptions. That means you can make use of the concept of functions to throw an error, right? You can make use of function. This is the important point you should remember. So let us go with the programming concept, right? So let us forget about this function definition. Since the execution always starts with the main function, I go and execute the main function, and within the try block, what is that I have written here? It is function null comma 0. So it is nothing but a function call. Right. So whenever there is a function call, all that overhead that happens here will happen, and the control will jump from this caller function to the callee function. So the control is jumping here. So what is the values that is passed here? The first parameter is null and the second one is 0. So this particular null value is assigned to PTR and X is assigned a value of 0. Is it right or not?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So in this particular function, I have used the if condition. If PTR is equal to null, throw PTR. Right. And another statement, if X is equal to 0, throw X, and you write some other functionality. I'm not worried about what functionality is going to be taken care by this function. I just want to explain that the throw statements can be written inside a function also. That means a function can throw an exception, right? But this happens only when you call the function within the try block. So when you are trying to call the function within the try block, and the function can implement the throw statements. So what is that it is going to execute here at this point? So what is the value of PTR here?
Null, sir.
Null. What is the value of X here? 0.
0.
So if
0.
PTR is equal to null, is this condition true or false?
True,
True,
sir.
sir.
So this throw pointer will be executed. This statement will be executed. So whenever the throw is there, what happens? It is going to throw this null value from here to here. Right?
Yeah.
Can we execute this statement again?
Yes, sir.
No. Why? Because it works on the termination model. Termination model means once you throw the pointer or once you throw
It never
the
return
exception,
back.
it will never return back. That is called as the termination model. Right. So this is just
Okay.
to explain you how this throw can be written inside the function. Right. So once this throw has been executed, it will go and it will go and execute this catch block. Right. What is this catch block called?
Default.
Default catch block, right?
exception.
We can say it as a default catch block. Therefore it is going to catch the pointer here, and it is going to execute this caught exception from fun, which is nothing but a function, right? So like this you can make use of the functions to throw the exceptions, but remember that you cannot write or define a function inside this throw, inside this try, right? The point here you have to remember is whenever you want to throw an exception from the function, it is mandatory that you call that function from the try block. Then only this type of throwing an exception from the function is possible. Right? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
So, and the next point what we have is in C++ try catch blocks can be nested. What do you mean by nesting?
Repeating, sir.
It's
One
not-
another other.
Loop, sir.
right, it is not
Loop.
repeating. Repetition means loops, right? Nesting means one thing inside another thing, right? That you can keep any number of things within the same thing, right? For example, nested if means if you write the condition 1 and within this if you write another condition 2
Another condition.
and within this if you can write like this, right? So this is called as nesting. That means you are putting one if inside another if. So this is called as nested if. So nesting is not the concept that is only related to the loops. It can be also applied to the flow control mechanisms also, right? So for example, if I want to write a nested for loop, what I write? So I take a for loop here for I is equal to 0, I less than n, I plus plus, and then I write another for loop inside it. For j is equal to 0, j is less than m, j plus plus. So this is the type of nested for loops you will make use of in the concept of matrices, right? So don't assume
Yes,
that the nesting is only applied to the looping construct. It can be applied to the flow controls also. So remember that nesting is something where you are going to embed one particular construct inside the same construct, right? So here also we can have nested try catch blocks. Nested try catch blocks is supported in C++. That means you can put one try catch block inside another try catch block. That's it. So let us see an example on this one. See, so let us start our discussion with the main. I have the main function. In the main function I am writing the try block. This try block is starting here and it is going to end here. So this is my try block 1, right? And within this try block I have written another try catch block. This is second try block, right? So what is the corresponding catch block of the try block 1?
Catch intent, sir.
So let me take this one, right? So this is one try block and this is the second try block, and let me take this one. This is the catch block and this is another catch block. So you can observe here that the inner try catch block here, the try block true and 2 and the catch block 2 are matching each other, so they should be written as a single one. So this is common, they are 1 and 1.
Yes, sir.
Right. So every try catch will have, every try block will have a corresponding matching catch block. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
So catch block 2
Yes, sir.
is mapping with the try block 2, and similarly catch block 1 is mapped with the try block 1. So here in the inner try block 2 I am throwing a value of 20. What is the value of 20? It is an integer, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
See
sir.
here. So this 20 is thrown and it is caught at catch 2, right? It is, why? Because this catch block 2 is mapping with the try block 2, therefore it will go and execute this particular set only. It won't go out of this outer try block and it will execute this one, right? So this 20 is going to execute this one. Why? Because this 20 integer value is mapping with the parameter of catch block 2. Therefore what it is doing here, it is printing a statement called handle partially. So it will print a statement handle partially and it will execute the next statement. What is the next statement here?
Throw.
It is just a throw, right? We are not throwing any value here, it is just throw. This concept we call it as the rethrowing an exception. This is a very important, right? So you can rethrow an exception from one catch block to another catch block. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
So
Yes, sir.
rethrowing of exception is possible. In the rethrow concept we are not going to give any inputs to the throw. That means we are not throwing any value, we just make use of the throw statement. So when you just write the throw statement, this particular throw will come out of the thing of the external try block and it will execute the next catch block, right? So this is the concept of rethrowing, and this also explains the concept of nested try catch blocks. Is it clear? The point here you have to remember is you can nest the try catch blocks, and if you observe all the programs that I have explained in the exception handling, you never separated a catch block from the try block. So they are pair, so you should write the catch block after the try block. You cannot skip the catch block, right? So you cannot write any code in between this try block and the catch block. That is important. So once you write the try block, immediately after the try block is ended, you have to start the catch block. So any number of catch blocks you can write, but at least one catch block should immediately follow the try block. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And the last point of our discussion is when an exception is thrown, all objects created inside the enclosing try block are destructed before the control is transferred to the catch block, right? So this is very important point. So once you throw an exception, all the that means you are coming out of the scope of the try block, right? You are coming out of the scope of the try block. So when you are coming out of the scope of the try block, all the objects or variables that are created inside the try block will be destructed automatically before the control is transferred to the corresponding catch block, right? So it is something similar to that of a function. So when you come out of the function, what happens to the variables? They will be destructed, right? So in the similar way, when you have an exception and you are trying to throw it, at the time of throwing the exception, whatever values or objects we have in the try block, they will be completely destroyed, right? So let us take an example here. Since I am explaining it with the concept of objects, I create a class. I have created a class test, and what is this one? What is this function called?
Constructor, sir.
Constructor, right? And what is this one?
Destructor, sir.
Destructors.
Right. So this is how I define my class test, and inside main, see here, this is my try block and this is my catch block. So inside the try block, I am creating an object T1 to the class test, right? So when the object is created, what is that? That is the compiler is doing automatically. Which function is invoked?
Constructor, sir.
Constructor, sir.
Therefore, what is the constructor? We have the statement as constructor of test. So it will print the value, or it will print the statement as constructor of test. And then after this statement is executed, throw of 10. What happens here? I'm just throwing a value of 10 here, which is an integer value, right? So when the throw is executed, the control will be coming out of the try block and it is going to execute the catch block that immediately follows it, right? So when this happens, as I told, that when we are coming out of the scope of the try block, all the objects that are created at that try block will be destroyed. So how you can test it, right? So when the object is destroyed, which function is going to be invoked?
Destructor, sir.
Destructors.
Right? So destructor function, this particular statement will be executed. Destructor of test is executed, and then after this it will execute this statement. Why? Because this catch block is the corresponding catch block for this throw value, right? So it will execute, it will print the statement as caught 10. That's it. So you can observe here that while you are creating an object of class test, the constructor is invoked, and while you are executing this throw, when you are coming out of this try block, every object that is created will be destroyed. That we can check it by using the concept of destructors. So here when the throw is executed, it will go and directly execute, the compiler will directly execute this destructor and this statement will be printed. So by this you can come to know that the object that is created, T1, that is created inside this try block is destroyed. Is it clear up to this point?
Yes, sir.
So,
So this is the end of today's session. So we have seen very important points regarding this exception handling, where the first one is we can have a special catch block to catch all the exceptions. We call it as the default exception or the generic catch, default catch or generic catch. We have explained it with an example. And the second point is type conversion does not happen for any primitive data types. So don't assume that exceptions, while you are throwing the values to handle the exceptions, the implicit type conversion will not happen. The matching of the data types should happen perfectly. That means character should match with character, integer should match with integer. It's not that character is converted into integer like that, right? So implicit type conversion never happen in exception handling. And the third point is if an exception is thrown and not caught anywhere, the program will terminate abruptly, right? So when an exception is thrown, it is your responsibility to handle those exceptions using the corresponding catch block. Otherwise the program will terminate abruptly. And the fourth point is a derived class exception should be caught before a base class exception. Very important point. So remember that. So remember that you always handle the derived class exceptions before the base class exceptions. That means you try to write the catch block of the derived class first, and then you try to write the catch block of base class. Then only your program will execute. Otherwise, you will get the derived class will never be executed, right? And another important point we have discussed is we have a standard class which is called as exception, from which all the standard exception has been derived. So the primary base class for exceptions is exception class. And next point is all the exceptions in C++ are unchecked, right? That means the compiler does not take the responsibility of checking these exceptions, right? All these we have is runtime exceptions only. And next point we have discussed is we can make use of the functions to specify all uncaught exceptions. So you can make use of the function to throw an exception, but the point you have to remember here is that try block should consist of a function call. And next point we have discussed is try catch blocks can be nested, right? We can nest any number of try catch blocks, but remember that the corresponding catch block for the corresponding try block should be defined immediately after the corresponding try block only, right? Don't separate them. Try catch blocks should never be separated. And in this particular example we have already discussed that we can rethrow an exception by using a simple throw statement, right? So and the last point is when an exception is thrown, all the objects that are created inside the try block will be destructed automatically by the compiler before the control is transferred to the catch block. Everything we have explained with the programming examples, right? So this is end of today's session. Thank you one and all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.